The Godzilla franchise has evolved quite a bit since the original film was released in 1954. What originally began as a thoughtful, nuanced meditation on the horrors of war and atomic power very quickly transformed into a genre people of all ages could enjoy. To this end, Godzilla spent the 60s gradually developing into a hero figure. By the 70s, he had become a full-fledged savior of the planet whom kids could root for as he fought increasingly offbeat foes. Since then, his character has settled into a sort of middle ground, whereby he could be a hero in one film and a villain in the next, though most often he is something in between, giving creators lots of leeway as far as tone is concerned. Given all this, it is only natural that the Godzilla series have its fair share of humorous moments. Sometimes they're brief moments of levity in an otherwise serious film, other times they're a cherry on top of an already bonkers movie whose sole purpose is to delight, and sometimes they're just plain unintentional, a moment where the execution clearly didn't align with the vision. Either way, Godzilla has had his fair share of funny bits here and there, and so I thought it would be fun to highlight a handful of some of my favorites here for your viewing pleasure. So sit back, relax, and join me as I count down the top 10 funniest Godzilla moments. Number 10. Hard Hat Hit, Godzilla vs. Biollante. For the most part, Godzilla vs. Biollante is a very serious film. A follow-up to the even more deadly serious The Return of Godzilla, this film sees the monster awaken from his volcanic slumber as the world fights over the use of his cells, whose reproductive properties would prove invaluable to whatever nation can obtain and harvest them. The film is all about the danger of genetic engineering, which manifests in the form of Biollante, a creature composed of Godzilla, plant, and human DNA. Given this heavy subject matter, the film is quite light on the humor, and what little of it there is comes from the character Goro Gondo, whose nonchalant attitude towards Godzilla adds just the right amount of levity to a story that treats itself quite earnestly. Still, none of Gondo's quips can prepare you for a moment so over the top that you might find yourself wondering if you imagined it. About halfway through the film, Gondo and Kirishima have managed to track down the location of a stolen case of anti-nuclear energy bacteria, a substance that they hope can kill Godzilla, from the office of the Soradian Oil Corporation in Osaka. The two happen to arrive just as an employee is attempting to escape with the bacteria, and Gondo rushes in to stop him. As the two struggle, Kirishima hangs back, grabs some sort of anti-Seradian device, and hits the man over the head with it, accompanied by an obnoxiously cartoonish sound effect straight out of the Looney Tunes. It's a blink or you'll miss it moment, but stands out all the more because of how much it contrasts with the rather grounded approach of the rest of the film. Also, the way the actor swings the object is not convincing in the slightest, which, on top of the fact that the man is wearing a hard hat, makes it even more laughably unbelievable. It's unclear whether this moment was meant to be comical or if it's just poor execution, but either way, it's a moment I, and likely many others, never forgot, and never fails to get a chuckle out of me on subsequent rewatches. Number 9. Like Crap Through a Goose, Godzilla 2000. English dubs of foreign films have always been a tad awkward, to say the least, and this has always been the case with Godzilla. Some are undoubtedly better than others, but for the most part, English dubs are either serviceable or flat out bad. Godzilla 2000 is one of the rare cases where genuine effort was put into the dub in order to make it presentable for US theatrical release. Decent actors were hired to dub over the characters, and the script was written to remain mostly faithful to the Japanese version. However, this doesn't mean TriStar didn't have some fun at the film's expense. The English dub is peppered with little bits of comedy that add a tongue-in-cheek vibe to the film that the Japanese version doesn't necessarily have, and while your appreciation for this may vary, there's no denying that the film contains a few gems that are sure to stick in your head.
Gott in Himmel!
Oh, bite me! Arrgh!
Great Caesar's ghost!
The greatest one-liner though comes during a briefing before the first big military battle with Godzilla. The generals are going over their plan to stop Godzilla, including the use of a new prototype missile that is capable of piercing his thick skin. This is said as much in the Japanese version, but the American version uses some more colorful language to describe the results.
I guarantee it'll go through Godzilla like crap through a goose.
It is by far one of the most absurd lines in a Godzilla movie, maybe in any movie ever. Half of the comedic effect is due to the delivery of the actor. You can tell he's having a lot of fun saying it. There's also the fact that the line just plain doesn't make any sense. If you were ever on the fence on whether to take this film seriously, after this point, all bets were off. Number 8. Eat Your Vegetables, King Kong vs. Godzilla. The first time Godzilla and Kong met in the ring in 1962's King Kong vs. Godzilla, it was an epic cinematic event. To this day, it still remains one of the most successful entries in the franchise, and solidified Godzilla as an icon that Toho was more than happy to profit from for the decades that followed. Those that have only seen the heavily edited American version though may be surprised to find that the original Japanese version is quite funny, intentionally so. The film satirizes capitalism and commercialism, using the two titular titans as mascots of sorts that the characters literally bet on. Both Kong and Godzilla are given very distinct personalities, with Kong being the drunken underdog and Godzilla being the overpowered jerk who loves causing pain. Both of these personalities are allowed to flourish in the big fight that they have with each other on the slopes of Mount Fuji. The fight is full of great moments, many of them very funny, but the one everyone remembers is when a newly powered Kong shoves a tree down Godzilla's throat. Godzilla is of course very annoyed by this, so he retaliates by spewing the tree back at Kong with his atomic breath. It's a rather brief moment, but a resonant one, evident by the fact that it has become a meme. In fact, some are expecting a similar moment to happen in the upcoming Godzilla vs. Kong. It's a perfectly humorous summation of the difference in power and style between cinema's two most famous giant monsters. Number 7. Clumsy Godzilla, Mothra vs. Godzilla. Following the satirical King Kong vs. Godzilla, Mothra vs. Godzilla steered the then burgeoning franchise back into a more serious direction. While its eye is still firmly set on criticizing capitalism, it extends its reach even further into the realm of environmentalism. It does so in a more earnest, straightforward way. However, that doesn't mean the film doesn't have its moments of comedy. Some of them are more obvious, such as Jiro, a comic relief character who maneuvers his way around the film, always eating an egg and making keen observations. Even the villains are over the top in a way that you can't help but chuckle at during certain moments. But one of the more understated touches of humor that makes Mothra vs. Godzilla even more of a gem is how much of a klutz Godzilla is. Despite being brought up to a level of villainy only rivaled by the original film at the time, there is a moment early on in the film where Godzilla, who has just woken up from a long nap underground, accidentally gets his tail caught in a tower. Naturally, being the brute that he is, he tries to pull it out with as much force as possible, and in doing so fumbles forward, causing the tower to collapse on top of him. This moment is then quickly followed up by another, where Godzilla doesn't watch his step and ends up falling into the Osaka castle, destroying it completely. It's not funny in an obvious way, but this moment contributes a lot towards making Godzilla seem less like a brain-dead monster bent on destruction and more like a character that you can understand on some fundamental level. The big guy just woke up and tripped on his way to breakfast. Who among us can't relate to that? It's a very humanizing and funny moment for the king of the monsters. Number 6. Minion plays jump rope with his dad's tail, Son of Godzilla. Son of Godzilla gets a lot of flack for introducing the concept of a baby Godzilla into the franchise. Many consider it to be the true beginning of Godzilla's turn toward being geared more towards children, with Minion as the mascot for this transition. Thus, many despise the little guy and wish for nothing more than to erase him from the franchise's history. But these people are crazy. Minion is adorable, and his relationship with his dad is the film's highlight. There are so many great moments between these two, many of them quite funny, especially if you have any experience with kids. But the funniest has got to be about midway through the film. Godzilla is just trying to get some shut-eye, leaving his son alone to entertain himself with a bit of old kick the rock. However, as kids tend to do, he loses interest, and instead finds a new challenge to occupy his time, his dad's tail. Minion then proceeds to play jump rope with it, which of course irritates Godzilla, but not enough to stir him from his sleep, because Godzilla is a hands-off parent who believes in letting consequences speak for themselves. And so when Minion eventually falls flat on his face, Godzilla just looks up and is like, "You learn your lesson, boy?" And Minion's like, "Yes, Dad," and walks away. Cute, funny moments like this are what make Son of Godzilla such an endearing classic. Yes, it played a major part in softening Godzilla into a superhero for children, but it was a necessary part of his evolution. It was another way in which Godzilla was further humanized and turned into a pop culture icon. And it was worth it, because in doing so, we got a movie that serves as one of the best entry points for introducing Godzilla to children, and ensuring a whole new generation of fans is born. So thank you, Minion. We salute you. Number 5. Godzilla The Troll, GMK. The critically acclaimed Shusuke Kaneko directed Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah Giant Monsters All-Out Attack is not exactly known for its side-splitting antics. It's one of the darkest entries in the franchise, where Godzilla is possessed by the restless souls of those killed by the Japanese in World War II, and is set on destroying Japan as revenge for being forgotten by the younger generation. It's pretty heavy subject matter, but that doesn't mean there aren't a few moments of slyly dark humor to lighten things up a bit. The best of these comes when Godzilla finally makes his way ashore on Japan, headed for a clash with the guardian monster Baragon. The lone survivor of a previous night's attack is recuperating in the hospital, thinking she is safe and secure, only to look out her window and see Godzilla heading straight for her. She cries, waiting for her demise as Godzilla gets closer and closer. And then he merely passes by, leaving the girl alive and relieved. And then at the last second his tail smashes into the building, killing the poor girl instantly. It's one of the franchise's few moments of black humor, where the punchline is the death of an innocent civilian, the kind who always suffer the most when Godzilla attacks. It treads a fine line between being funny and just plain mean-spirited, but it's a standout moment in the film because it serves to highlight how ruthless this Godzilla is, with just a slight touch of humor that adds some edge to the character. Number 4, New York City, Godzilla Final Wars. Godzilla Final Wars is a very divisive chapter of the Godzilla franchise, with some seeing it as a fun-filled 50th anniversary celebration, and others as disappointing nonsensical trash unworthy of the original film that inspired it. Regardless of how you feel, there is no doubt that the film is campy as hell. It doesn't take itself seriously at all, and no other scene better demonstrates this than when the film takes a little pit stop in New York, where we get to see what Japan really thinks goes on in the Big Apple, and it's not flattering. We come into the middle of a tense circumstance between what one can assume to be a pimp and a blatantly dismissive cop, with a drunk hobo to bear witness. The cop is giving the pimp a ticket, and he doesn't like that very much, and when the cop doesn't respond to his threat, he pulls a gun, threatening to shoot him, quote, all the way up to Jersey, which of course causes the cop to draw his gun. Naturally, the hobo thinks all of this is absolutely hilarious, egging the both of them to take each other out. Thankfully, before the situation can escalate any further, Rodan makes his grand entrance and blows them all away. Between the over-the-top acting, cartoony sound effects, the bizarrely bad dubbing, and just the overall absurd nature of the scenario, this whole scene plays out like a surreal exaggeration of reality that even by genre standards is ridiculous. And depending on how you view the film around it, it's either cringy or hilarious. Reality, of course, is somewhere in the middle, but either way, it's hard to imagine anyone not being entertained in some way. It certainly doesn't cast American city life in a favorable light, but it sure is funny, and the fact that it manages to stand out in a film as over-the-top as Final Wars is an accomplishment of its own. Number 3, Mothra Teaches Godzilla and Rodan a Lesson. Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, the immediate follow-up to Mothra vs. Godzilla, is when the series truly began to throw away any pretense of seriousness. Godzilla's highly bumbling personality is presented with even greater clarity, as is Rodan's, who is finally brought back following his introduction in the 1956 film Rodan. Both monsters are humanized to the point where their fight feels less like monsters fighting and more like a petty schoolyard brawl, where both creatures are looking for a fight and take delight in causing pain to the other. Enter Mothra, the diplomatic peacekeeper who wishes nothing more than to break up their pointless squabble so that they may work together against the greater threat, King Ghidorah, who's arrived at Earth for the sole purpose of destroying it. She gets their attention by spraying them with her silk, and then proceeds to scold them for their immaturity and explain the bigger picture, all with the Shobijin there to translate for the audience. It's an undeniably self-aware and comical moment, the English dub even more so, thanks to this little gem that has since become an in-joke within the fandom.
Oh, Godzilla, what terrible language!
This moment may be very funny, but it was a watershed moment for Godzilla and the kaiju genre at large. Slowly over time, the monsters, all three of which had had their own standalone films, were being anthropomorphized and transformed into full-fledged characters with distinct personalities. All pretense of realism was thrown out the window, and more emphasis was placed on fantasy and fun. Godzilla and his ilk were no longer merely monsters. They were becoming icons of Japanese cinema, characters that you could root for and laugh at, that you could see yourself in. It was a strange concept, especially compared to Western monster movies. Turns out monsters can be quite adept at teaching life lessons, which in this case was the power of cooperation. Godzilla was a changed monster after this, as was Rodan, and would go on to become a begrudging protector of the Earth and the humans that live on it. Number 2, the Godzilla Dance, Invasion of Astro-Monster. Invasion of Astro-Monster, or Godzilla vs. Monster Zero as it's known in the US, is the sequel to Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, and sees Godzilla and Rodan face off against the Golden Space Dragon once again. However, unlike its predecessor, this film reins back the camp a bit to tell a more serious science fiction focused story about two-faced alien invaders and their plot to take over Earth, which of course involves the use of giant monsters as weapons of mass destruction, a trope that would become quite common as the series went along. But while the movie is a mostly serious affair, there is one moment that breaks from the mold so jarringly that it has since become one of the franchise's most defining. After agreeing to help rid the citizens of Planet X of King Ghidorah, mankind lends them Godzilla and Rodan to do so, and the three have a quick battle in which the two overpower Ghidorah, seemingly running him off the planet and out into space once more. It's a decisive victory, so what's a monster to do to celebrate? Why, dance a little jig, of course. And so Godzilla, out of nowhere, suddenly breaks out into a happy dance, jumping up and down and flailing his arms with glee. It's pretty unforgettable and hilarious, again because it comes out of nowhere in a fairly serious film, and nothing even remotely similar ever happens again. The dance is a reference to a popular comedy manga series at the time called Osumatsu-kun, which special effects director Eiji Tsuburaya and actor Yoshio Tsuchiya were fans of. Director Ishiro Honda was initially against it, but Tsuburaya fought for its inclusion, figuring children would be delighted. In the end, of course, he won out, and the moment, often referred to as the Godzilla Victory Dance, has since become infamous, to the point where casual fans have probably come across it at least once. So powerful was this moment that it has since become synonymous with the film itself, which is saying something because Invasion of Astro-Monster is considered one of the best entries in the franchise. It was yet another signal of Godzilla's gradual transformation from villain to hero, and one that will likely never be topped. Number 1. The Godzilla Dropkick, Godzilla vs. Megalon. The Godzilla fandom is full of diverse and diverging opinions, but if there's one thing that is nearly unanimous, it is the agreement that there is no more infamous moment of unbridled hilarity in the entirety of the Godzilla franchise than the dropkick in Godzilla vs. Megalon. Unlike Invasion of Astro-Monster, this moment is the culmination of every wacky, nonsensical event that came before. It is the grand finale, the piece de resistance of a nearly half-hour-long tag team wrestling match between Godzilla and Jet Jaguar and the villains Megalon and Gigan. After a long and arduous battle, our heroes gain the upper hand, causing Gigan to split and run away like the coward he is, leaving Megalon alone with no hope of winning. Try as he might, Megalon is no match for the combined might of Godzilla and Jet Jaguar, and very quickly he finds himself at their mercy as Godzilla proceeds to enthusiastically pummel him with his feet, drop-kicking him not once but twice. On paper, the moment seems fairly standard, but it's the execution here that turns it into a bit of unforgettable comedy. Godzilla defies the laws of physics, gliding motionless along on his tail in such a way that cannot hide its low budget. It is gleefully and gloriously cheesy, even by late 70s era Godzilla standards. It has been mocked and ridiculed countless times, and it's not hard to see why. In a way, this moment was a result of every decision made in the preceding years. A moment where it couldn't be any clearer just how far Godzilla had diverged from his nuclear origins. It's no surprise then that the following year Toho made a concerted effort to turn the franchise back to its more serious roots. But by 1975, it was too little too late, and Godzilla went into hibernation for 9 years. But the Godzilla Dropkick is forever, and will always live on in our hearts as the dumbest, silliest, and funniest moment in Godzilla's long cinematic career. Thank you so much for watching. Do you have a favorite funny moment from the Godzilla series? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Up From the Depths for more Godzilla goodness. Also, don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you never miss a single video. Again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, long live the king.